Welcome to Scholastic Scrimmage here on WQLN PBS. Scholastic Scrimmage is brought to you by the members of WQLN and these sponsors. Morris Coupling, a company with a strong commitment to service, manufactures parts for pneumatic conveying and industrial vacuum systems. Supported by a dedicated group of employees, Morris has called Erie home for more than 80 years. When it's time to choose a college, there's a choice recognized worldwide that's close to home. Penn State Barrett offers the resources of a major university with a wide range of undergraduate and graduate degree programs and support for student success. Learn more at barron.psu.edu.
Hello and welcome to round 2 of the 3rd season of Scholastic Scrimmage here on WQLN PBS. I'm your host, Glenn Holland. The match will have 2 halves with a lightning round midway through each half. We'll get to know the students a little better at halftime. As a reminder, Scholastic Scrimmage is a game that requires rapid recall of specific factual information and is not an indication of academic training. Time for our first toss-up. Buzzers ready? Here we go. What realm of Norse mythology, created using the eyebrows of the Jotun Ymir, is connected to Asgard by the Bifrost Bridge and is the home of humans? General McLane, Owen.
Midgard.
That is correct. Here's your bonus. Laurie Strode has a final showdown with supernatural killer Michael Myers in a 2022 entry in what horror film series?
Halloween.
That is correct. Toss-up. What author depicted a Babylonian thinker in his book Zadig and satirized mathematician Gottfried Leibniz as the optimistic Dr. Pangloss in Candide? That was Voltaire. Pencil and paper ready for this toss-up. What is the quotient of 9 factorial divided by 7 factorial given 9 factorial equals 9 times 8 times 7, and so on down to 1. The answer there is 72. Toss-up. What theorist, whose ideas were a major basis of Jacques Lacan's writings, analyzed Irma in the interpretation of dreams and founded psychoanalysis? General McLane, Owen.
Sigmund Freud.
That is correct. Here is your bonus. What Italian author wrote about novice monk Adso of Melk, who helps William of Baskerville find a murderer in the 1980 novel The Name of the Rose? That is Umberto Eco. Toss-up. What man, whose colitis forced him to resign as head of the LDP in 2020, was assassinated after being the longest-serving Japanese prime minister? General McLane, Peter.
Shinzo Abe.
That is correct. Here is your bonus. In 1959, African-American pinch hitter Pumpsie Green debuted against the White Sox, making what team the last in the major leagues to integrate?
Yankees.
I'm sorry?
Yankees.
No, it's the Boston Red Sox. Toss-up. What European president who twice vetoed the UK's entry into the EEC established the Fifth Republic and commanded Free France during World War II? General McLane, Peter.
Charles de Gaulle.
That is correct. Here is your bonus. What plain state was represented in the Senate by Tom Daschle and by the 1972 Democratic nominee for president, George McGovern?
Minnesota.
No, it was South Dakota. Toss-up. What bone which has a tuberosity to which the patellar ligament attaches, forms a hinge joint with the femur, and is commonly called the shin bone? That is the tibia. Toss-up. What country, which contains the largest portion of both the Carpathian Mountains and the delta of the Danube River, is also home to Transylvania? Tidioute, Owen.
Romania.
That is correct. Here's your bonus. What 1877 novel by Anna Sewell is narrated by the title horse, whose many owners include Farmer Gray, Squire Gordon, and London cab driver Jerry?
We don't know.
The answer is Black Beauty. Toss-up. Members of what profession, such as Marin Alsop, Carlo Maria Giulini, and Leopold Stokowski, often use a thin baton as they lead an orchestra? General McLane, Owen.
Conductor.
That is correct. Here is your bonus. Rusting is what type of process prevented by galvanization in which a refined metal is degraded to a more stable oxide?
Oxidization.
No, I'm looking for corrosion. Sorry. And now it is time for our lightning round, our first one. Tidioute won the toss, and you have a choice of topics. The first lightning round, the topics are artists' tools and former country names.
Former country names.
All right. What modern-day country was formerly known as Persia?
Iran.
Correct. Ceylon.
Pass.
Rhodesia.
Pass.
Abyssinia.
Pass.
Formosa.
Pass.
British Honduras.
Honduras.
No, Belize. Gold Coast in Western Africa.
Somalia.
No, that is Ghana. East Pakistan.
Bangladesh.
That is correct. Upper Volta.
Pass.
Kampuchea, when it was ruled by Pol Pot.
Vietnam.
No, that is Cambodia. Ceylon.
Pass.
That is Sri Lanka. Abyssinia, by the way, is Ethiopia. All right, General McLane, your topic is artists' tools. Name these things used by visual artists. Flat board for mixing pigments.
Easel?
Sorry?
No.
Palette?
Correct. Spinning device that pottery can be thrown on.
Pottery wheel.
Correct. A sculptural copy made using a mold.
Cast.
Correct. Cloth put on a studio floor to catch splatter or debris.
Drop cloth.
Correct. Oven for firing ceramics.
Kiln.
Correct. Plain fabric that most oil paintings are made on.
Canvas.
Correct. Flat metal tool that is hammered to chip away at a sculpture.
Chisel.
Correct. Fast drying paint, partly made of egg yolk.
Pass.
Impermeable gloss daubed onto finished ceramics.
Glaze.
Correct. Dim workspace for developing photographs.
Dark.
Darkroom, correct. Fast drying paint, partly made of egg yolk, is tempera. And now back to our regular line of questioning with this toss-up. What agency, whose Co-Intel Pro initiative targeted civil rights groups under Director J. Edgar Hoover? General McLane, Owen?
The FBI.
That is correct. Here's your bonus. The Bringer of War and The Mystic are subtitles of movements in what suite by Gustav Holst?
We don't know.
It's the planets. The bringer of war is Mars, and the mystic is Neptune. Toss-up. The brightest events in the universe are bursts, named for what form of radiation emitted by excited nuclei, which has energy higher than X-rays. Tidioute.
Gamma rays.
That is correct. Here's your bonus. What 17th century poem by Andrew Marvell urges the title woman to accept a lover's embrace because time's winged chariot is hurrying near?
Come on, Michael. I don't know. Someone needs to get What?
That is To His Coy Mistress. Toss-up. What 1937 novel, whose characters include a man known as Tea Cake and a resident of Eatonville named Janie Crawford, is by Zora Neale Hurston? That novel is Their Eyes Were Watching God. Toss-up. What conflict, described as a splendid little war by John Hay, ended with U.S. control of the Philippines and began after the sinking of the Maine? General McLane, Peter.
The Spanish-American War?
Correct. Remember the Maine. Here is your bonus. What Italian word, often used to mean a climax, is used in music to mean a gradual increase in loudness? You don't need to ring, but...
Crescendo.
Yes, correct. Here's your toss-up. What quantity, which is as low as possible at a mixture's eutectic point, is depressed in a solution and is 0 degrees Celsius for pure water? General McLane Owen.
Freezing point.
That is correct. Here's your bonus. What 19th century author wrote about a woman who implores Confederate troops to spare your country's flag in his poem Barbara Fritchie?
We don't know.
That is John Greenleaf Whittier. What river, whose upper section is called the Jinsha or Gold Sands River, flows past Wuhan and is the longest river in China and all of Asia? General McLane, Peter.
The Yangtze River?
That is correct. Here is your bonus. The conservation of what quantity, often denoted by capital L, can be illustrated using the example of a spinning skater?
Momentum.
What kind?
Centripetal?
Centripetal momentum.
I needed angular momentum. I'm sorry. Toss-up. What singer, whose name follows Big T-shirt in the lyrics of a namesake Armani White song, has a brother named Phineas who co-wrote her... General McLane, Lena.
Billie Eilish.
That is correct. Here is your bonus. Before a 2018 correction, the name of what New York City bridge was spelled with one Z fewer than that of its historical namesake?
Mizarro.
No, it's the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. Apparently, it only had one Z initially. And the namesake Giovanni di Verrazano had two. It is now halftime. The score is General McLane with 210 points and Tidioute with 40. Let's take a moment to get to know our contestants a little bit better.
Hello, I'm Peter Romberti. I'm from General McLane School District. I'm a senior, and if I had any superpower, I'd like to have super intelligence.
I'm Owen McMullen. I go to General McLane as a senior, and if I could have one superpower, I'd want control over time.
I'm Lena Bookhammer. I go to General McLane. I'm a junior. And if I could have one superpower, I would choose teleportation.
I'm Bella Williams. I go to General McLane. I'm a junior, and I would choose speed.
Hi, I'm Darian Craig. I go to Tidioute Community Charter School. I am a junior, and the superpower I would like to have
is mind reading.
I'm Aiden Baylor. I'm a senior. And if I go to Tidioute Community Charter School, if I could have any superpower, it would be teleportation.
Hello, I'm Owen Heenan. I go to Tidioute Community Charter School. I'm a senior, and if I could have any superpower, it'd be teleportation.
Hey, my name is Michael, and I go to Tidioute Community Charter School as a junior. If I could have any superpower, I would choose teleportation.
And now we begin the second half. Toss-up. What state is home to Haverford College, was represented in Congress during the Civil War by Thaddeus Stevens, and is governed from Harrisburg? Tidioute, Aiden.
Pennsylvania.
Correct. Here's your bonus. What no longer extant Gran Republic was established under the 1821 Constitution of Cucuta and contained modern Panama, Ecuador, and Venezuela?
Gran Colombia.
That is correct. Toss-up. What country's longtime dictator who wrote the Green Book and overthrew King Idris I before being killed during the Arab Spring was Muammar Gaddafi? General McLane, Peter.
Libya?
That is correct. Here's your bonus. What show that streams on Amazon Prime Video is set in Cousins Beach, stars Lola Tong as Belly, and is named after a young adult novel by Jenny Han?
Oh, sorry.
What? The Summer I Turned Pretty.
That is correct. What English scientist names the total charge on a mole of electrons, the law of electromagnetic induction, and a cage that blocks electric fields? General McLane, Peter?
Rutherford?
No. Tidioute? That is Michael Faraday. Toss-up. What company whose CEO, Xu Zichu, testified to Congress in March? Tidioute, Darian.
TikTok?
That is correct. Here's your bonus. What epic poem, whose title character is exiled on the request of Kaikeya, features the seventh avatar of Vishnu defeating Ravana and rescuing Sita?
We don't know.
That epic poet is the Ramayana. Toss-up. What first female member of the Royal Statistical Society rose to prominence during the Crimean War, during which she served as a nurse to soldiers? That is Florence Nightingale, the lady with the lamp. Toss-up. What actor who won an Oscar for King Richard was subsequently banned from the Academy? Tidioute, Darian.
Will Smith.
That is correct. Here's your bonus. What French-American mathematician is the namesake of a self-similar set and in 1975 coined the term fractal?
I don't even know. We don't know.
That was Benoit Mandelbrot. Toss-up. What country produced a novel about an outlaw and 108 spirits titled Water Margin, and a story about the monkey Sun Wukong titled Journey to the West? Tidioute, Darian.
Japan?
No. General McLane?
China.
That is correct. Here's your bonus. In what year, on November 11th at 11 o'clock a.m., did the armistice that ended fighting in World War I take effect?
1918.
That is correct. Toss-up. What country breached the Mannerheim Line in the Winter War against Finland and defeated a Nazi army in the Eastern Front's Battle of... General McLane, Owen.
Russian.
I need the name at the time.
The Soviet Union.
Yeah. The Soviet Union.
That is correct. A bonus. What island was the birthplace of author Seamus Heaney, whose poem Digging describes cutting through soggy peat to plant potatoes?
Ireland.
That is correct. Toss-up. Alex English spent a decade with the what NBA team who drafted a Serbian center who won back-to-back MVPs and NBA Finals MVP in 2023? General McLane, Lena?
Nuggets, Denver Nuggets.
That's correct, the Denver Nuggets. Here's your bonus. What term describes pairs of substances, such as oil and water, that do not mix to form a homogeneous solution?
Heterogeneous.
No, they are immiscible. And that means it is time for our lightning round. And this time, General McLane has first choice of topics. The two topics are also in a deck of cards and F in initials.
Also in a deck of cards.
All right. Name these things that share their names with playing cards. Villain played in movies by Jared Leto and Heath Ledger.
Joker.
Correct. 2020 song title used separately by Sam Smith and Megan Thee Stallion.
Queen.
No, that's Diamonds. Literary character who says, "Off with their heads."
King.
No, it's the Queen of Hearts. Surname of man named Rodney who was beaten by LAPD in 1991.
King.
Correct. Number of Russian composers in the Mighty Handful.
Pass.
Tennis serve not touched by an opponent.
Ace.
Correct. Outlet for plugging in a phone line.
Pass.
Number of samurai in Akira Kurosawa's film.
7.
Correct. Nursery rhyme character who stole the tarts and took them clean away.
Pass.
Pierre Tchaikovsky sorry, that is the Knave of Hearts you were looking for, the Jack. Tidioute, your lightning round topic is F in initials. For what word does the letter F stand for For what word does the letter F stand in these abbreviations? NFL, a sports league.
Football.
Correct. UFO, a spaceship.
Flying.
Correct. FCC, a federal agency.
Federal.
Correct. My mistake. JFK, the 35th
Fitzgerald.
president.
Fitzgerald.
Correct. SPF, a classification of sunscreen.
Pass.
FDA, a government agency.
Flight.
No, that's food. AFV, a class of military equipment.
Pass.
FAQ, a list of questions.
Frequently.
Correct. BFG, a character
Friendly.
invented by created Roald Dahl. I'm sorry.
Friendly.
Correct, friendly. RAF, a British military branch.
Force.
Correct. SPF, a classification of sunscreen.
Pass.
SPF, it is factor, sun protection factor. AFV, it is armored fighting vehicle. So we are back to our regular competition with this toss-up. What animals, sometimes called chelonians, have a shell made of bone or cartilage and include species such as the leatherback and terrapins? General McLane, Isabella?
Turtle.
That is correct. Here's your bonus. In 1843, Daniel Manhattan tried to assassinate what British Prime Minister whose first name inspired a nickname for British police officers as Bobbies? That is Robert Peel. Robert for Bobbies. Toss-up. What man who lost the rights to his book, If I Did It, to the Goldman family is a former football player who was acquitted of killing his ex-wife?
O.J. Simpson.
Correct. Here's your bonus. Talk Piscine is one of over 800 languages spoken on what country in what country whose capital is Port Moresby?
Australia.
No, it's Papua New Guinea, so I guess it is on what country. Here is your toss-up. What Shakespearean comedy depicts Sir John Falstaff's inept attempts to seduce Mistresses Ford and Page, the couple's title Happily Married Women? That Shakespearean comedy is The Merry Wives of Windsor. Toss-up. What man who appointed Alex Padilla to the Senate survived Larry Elder's attempt in a 2021 recall election to replace him as governor of California? General McLane, Peter.
Gavin Newsom.
Correct. Here is your bonus. What Greek god was having an affair with Aphrodite when they were caught in a net by her husband Hephaestus?
Aries.
That is correct. Toss-up. What material follows lost in the name of a technique for casting bronze statues and is used to depict celebrities at the museum Madame Tussauds? Tidioute, Darian.
Wax?
That is correct. Here's your bonus. In the 2023 case Allen v. Milligan, the Supreme Court upheld Section 2 of what 1965 law requiring Alabama to redraw its congressional district map?
Mary jangling or something.
That was the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Pencil and paper ready for this toss-up. If the logarithm of x equals 2, what is the value of the logarithm of the cube of x, given that x equals 100? Joe McLean, Peter.
5.
No? Tidioute? The answer is 6. Toss-up. What four-letter name of the protagonist of The Call of the Wild is also a word for an adult antelope or deer, as well as a slang word for a dollar? Jerry McLean, Owen.
Buck.
That is correct. Here's your bonus. What South American country lost almost 70% of its population in the War of the Triple Alliance against Argentina, Brazil, and Uruguay?
Paraguay.
That is correct. And that is the end of our contest. Tidioute, your score is 150. Great job during the matchup. Good luck with the rest of your academic year. Congratulations to General McLane. With a score of 360, you will be potentially moving on. Since we have 3 semifinal games, the 2 highest scores of those games will be moving on to the championship game. I'm Glenn Holland. Please join us again for the rest of our competition.